Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us. Today it's time to practice our lighting again, and today we're going to be lighting this. Alright, so let's talk some product lighting today. Now, this lesson is going to be about respecting the product and keeping it simple, right? This is just basic product lighting, how to keep it simple, clean, and just really respect what the product is and show it off, but also give it a little bit of mood and atmosphere. So we're going to start with this scene right here, and we're going to walk through this one and the basic lighting setup. I'm going to show you how I did it. And I'm also going to just kind of run you through the thought process. Then we're going to go over to the final scene, and with that one, I'm going to actually, just kind of give you a peek behind the curtains, and you can see exactly how that was done. So let's jump into it. Let's just go ahead and go. So with this scene, as always, the number one thing you need to do is get your composition. So I've already done that for us, and I've decided that this is the composition that I would like to have for this scene. Now, so you can see what's happening here from a wider view is all I have a camera that has an extremely long lens. I think it's, I don't even know, I think it's 250. Yeah, 250. And then I have our product, the espresso machine, that is here, and it's mostly at 0. That's another thing to note, always important. Try to work at 0 world space because it just makes your life easier when you're lighting. All right, so that's all that's happening. It's kind of up at an angle, and I have a camera that has an extremely long lens on it. All right, so for this shot, I know that I want it to feel bright and happy, and I want it to feel positive. So I went with cooler tones to kind of complement the product itself because it's kind of fun and poppy, and it's just nice feeling. But I also want to introduce warmer tones because warmer tones create a good feeling, right? Like a nice sunset, nice light. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be trying to create an atmosphere that is relaxing, calm, but also kind of uplifting. And so that's why the blue comes from the calmness, but also lets the product kind of sit on top of it very nicely. You know, it still gives a lot of respect to the product, so you can actually, that's what you care about, but then also have the orange to make you kind of feel bright and happy. All right, so let's just do it. Let's go ahead and start. All right, so jumping over here, starting up the IPR, you see we have nothing. So the first thing you need to do is create a light. I always like to create some sort of just something to start working with. So I usually just start with a dome light. And as I mentioned, I know that I want this to be kind of a blue atmosphere, right? As we saw in the video. So I've actually already saved the color that I like here. And I'm just going to go ahead and apply that color. And you're going to see it's going to make everything kind of blue and tinted and whatnot. But this is just going to act as our background. And the next thing I'd like to do is I want this to mostly act as a background, but also I want it to act as a fill light, just a slight fill light. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my details tab and I'm going to turn off reflection, transmission. I would still like it to give some global illumination. We don't need volume, and it can still affect the diffuse too. I think that's a good thing. Now, right now this is quite bright because again, I want this mostly just for the background. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring down the exposure quite a bit, maybe somewhere in here. That way, we're getting just a little bit of spill. All right, so now that we have our background of fill light, let's go ahead and let's create our key light. So let's create an area light, and let's go ahead and add a target tag and null. What I'd like to do is I'd like to take this target tag and null and just center it out, right? That way it's just kind of in the center. And let's think about the lighting for this. So when I look at this, I think it would be nice to complement what's happening here in the composition, right? We have very strong angles that are going in this direction. So let's complement that with the light, right? Let's think about why we're doing it and how we're doing it. What's the purpose behind it, right? So when light is up, it tends to be a bit more uplifting, whereas if it's down, it tends to be a bit more menacing, right? So this is supposed to be a positive thing. So let's try to enhance that through the light. All right, so I've got my area light, and another thing I like to do is I like to add textures to the area light. So I have this HDRI here, and basically it's just a softbox. It's a free image from this place called Pingo, and I'll link it for you in the comments. But what this is going to do is this is basically just going to break up the light a little bit for us. You might not see it necessarily, but you'll feel it, especially in motion. Let's go ahead and set this to color and temperature, because I know that I want to lower this temperature a bit, because if I lower the temperature, the warmer it's going to be. Now again, I don't want this to be a warm light, but I also don't want it to be like a very cold light. So let's just try something like that. Oops, not 600, 6,000. And the elephant in the room here is obviously way too bright. So let's just bring this intensity down to a reasonable number. Okay, so a lot of times I like to turn off all lights with the exception of the one that I am working with. So this has a couple of challenges for us. So if I actually turn this back on, we have a material, a metal material here that's extremely reflective, and then we have a material here that's quite dull. It's a dull plastic. So we have to be careful with that, because this is going to get really bright and this will not, as you can see. So for this, I think we're probably going to have to end up having a couple lights to take care of this problem. So for this one, what I want to do is I'd like to just kind of focus on the front area for this. Okay, I'd like to focus a little bit on the front area, and we'll deal with the side area soon. Okay, so we're just going to kind of get this like this. This is still feeling quite bright to me, so I think that we should we should move it back a little bit. If you have your lights further back, they're not going to be quite so bright. Okay, it's kind of nice to have a little bit of underlighting too. So we're kind of like getting a little bit of a balance between something that is welcoming but also creating shape for us, because that's ultimately what we would like to do. Okay, so we're going to say that this is a good start. We can always go back and adjust later if we want to. So let's call this key light. Now, this is great. We have the front, a start to it. Let's go ahead and let's get this side lit. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my key light and I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to call this key light top. All right. So let's go to our top view and let's just move this light over here, because what I'm trying to do, I'm going to turn off this original key light. I'm just trying to get this side to feel nice, basically, right? I'm trying to get it to, first of all, be able to see it, but also accentuate the contours that are happening on this machine. So let's go ahead and see if we can get this into a position that is maybe somewhat decent. All right, so that's starting to look pretty good. And then I think maybe we'll just crank up this intensity just a tad, and let's bring down the size a bit. When you bring down the size, it's also going to bring down your intensity, which is the reason why I brought up my intensity. But it's going to create kind of sharper edges when you bring down this size. So let's do something maybe in this area. Somewhere around here is starting to feel pretty nice. We might even want to bring it down a little bit. All right, so that's feeling pretty good. We might need to actually crank up the intensity, but for now, I'm just going to leave it. This is something that we're trying to get back as close as we can. All right, so now what we have is we have our key light that's happening here, and we have our key light that's happening from an overhead. And this key light is, giving you some contours here, and also opening up this area a bit. All right, so the next thing I'd like to do is I'd like to start to introduce that warm light that I was talking about. So let's go ahead and once again, just make a copy of this, and I'm gonna call this just warm light bottom. All right, and for this light, I actually want it to kind of hit this area down here, because this area is feeling quite dark to me. So let's just pull this down right to here. And once again, I want to turn off everything but this light. Okay, and my goal is to hit this area right here, kind of something that just creates a little bit of interest. And to do that, I'm going to need to make another target for this light. So we'll call this warm light target, and let's go ahead and we'll drag that into there, and let's put this target kind of like right on that corner, as close as we can get. close enough. All right, so for this bottom light, I know that I want to be very concentrated. So two things can happen for that. Basically, you can make the light smaller, and you can also decrease the spread. So let's start by decreasing the spread. When I decrease that spread, what it's going to do is it's going to make everything brighter because it's more concentrated, it's more pinpointed. And because of that, we need to make this light much smaller. So let's make this light much smaller. Let's maybe bring it in just a little bit. Perhaps around. And let's bring down this intensity quite a bit because this intensity is way too heavy right now. Because again, when you make lights spread less, the intensity just goes wild. All right, so that's pretty cool. And then let's bring this temperature way down. We want this to be a warm light, right? This should be a warm feeling light and it should feel nice. All right, so I'm gonna just try to move my target just a little bit down. Yeah, I think that's a little better. All right, cool. Now let's go ahead and let's put everything back on. And you can see we're starting to get somewhere, right? We're like this area is feeling quite nice. We're still quite dark over here, and we're also a little dark through here. So, but I think that this is a nice start to where we want to be. What I do think is I think we need some more information over here. So let's take our warm light again, and let's go to our top view. And let's just bring this light over here. Now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create something that's opens this up over here. But I really don't want to hit the front too much because again, that front is quite heavy. I'm gonna copy this target again. We're gonna call this warm light right. And let's put this over here. And let's just put this like somewhere in here maybe. Let me see where I'm at. Okay, so now we're starting to get that kind of nice warm light happening there. All right, let's move it a little bit behind because I'm kind of thinking this is more like a rim light. And then maybe let's bring up the intensity. And then let's perhaps make it a bit wider. So you can see the difference here of what's happening. It's creating, you know, some highlights here and here. We'll just solo it. I still think it's probably hitting the front too much because really all I want to do is just kind of act as a warm, yeah, it's more like a warm rim light. But for now, we're going to say that's pretty good. Okay, cool. So this is good. This is a good base because what we have here now, number one, we have control. We have control over our light. So if our client comes in and says, hey, you know, like, I don't like whatever, like change it, like we can actually do that. Whereas like if you're working just with an HDRI, you're kind of stuck with it. But HDRIs are important, and that brings me to the next light that we're going to add. We are going to add kind of a master HDRI light that is going to help just kind of round this all out. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a dome light, and this is going to be called Dome Master. And I've already selected HDRI that I like. All right, so this is the dome light that I have selected. And what I like about this is a couple things. There's lots of darks to lights, right? So you have essentially like your highlights, and it's just good for reflective objects. But there's also some warmth in here, right? Like the warmth from the wood, and you have the warmth from the lights, but you also have the coolness of the sky. So I thought this was kind of a nice one to begin with. So let's go ahead and let's turn off the background because we don't want to see that. And then let's just solo everything. Let's just solo this light, and let's just try to get this kind of into position of a place that might be nice. Because again, we just want this to fill in the parts that we haven't, or we're not able to quite fill in. So let's just find something that's kind of decent and will help us get that last 10%. Maybe like somewhere in there or something maybe. All right, so like this looks nice even of its own, but when we come back and we add everything else is when you kind of take it to the next level, right? That's when you really start to add value to these. You create interest. And again, you can light with HDRIs, but you don't have that control. And that's really where it's to your benefit to light with lights, real lights, as much as you can, and use HDRIs kind of as your friend. Now, there's one other thing I did for this, and the other thing that I did is, I'm actually cheating here a little bit because I know this video is running long, but I have another light here that I used, and this last light is a dome light. All right, I'm going to show you what it's doing. This dome light is doing nothing more than trying to light these shiny parts. So there was a couple shiny parts. I'll go back and I'll show you before and after. You'll see it's very black here, like there's not good range that's happening. So what I did is I created a dome light that only affects those parts. So I went to project and I found what those shiny parts were, and I said only include those. And then I essentially just took the same HDRI and I moved it around a bit to kind of help hit that area, right? Because this one wasn't doing it, but it still matches, you know, the environment. So then when we put it all together, that's what we have. All right, so the one final thing I want to do with the scene is I just want to break up the light a little bit. And to do that, we're going to use a gobo. Now, gobos work best with spotlights. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's create a spotlight. And I'm going to turn off my viewport really quick. I'm going to turn off all of our other lights. We just have our spotlight. I'm going to add a target and null. I'm going to center the null. And I'd like for this variation to happen on this side, because this is what we're seeing, where we're seeing it the most. So let's go ahead and let's go to our redshift spotlight and let's add a shader graph. Okay. When we add a shader graph, it's automatically going to add a texture up here, and then let's edit the shader graph. All right, let's go ahead and bring in our texture. So I have a bamboo tree texture here, and I'll put the link to this also. This one was not free, but it's like a really great pack that's was like $5 or something. But anyways, this moves just kind of subtly. It like sways in the wind. Let's go to animation. Let's go ahead and say that we want to loop, detect the frames. Great. It does that. And let's go ahead and pipe this into general color. All right, so now this spotlight will be projecting this. Let's see, I also want to move my spotlight here because I know that I want it to be coming from there. All right, so you can see what's happening here, and you can see that it's just subtly moving throughout. Okay, now to make these shadows softer, I want to go under details and say softness affects gobo. Nothing happens. What we need to do is we need to go back to our shader graph, and let's go ahead and let's start to make it softer. So I'm just going to crank the softness like a lot, and hopefully I don't crash. Okay, whatever, we'll just say 4, see what that looks like. Great, might be too soft, but it's more of the idea for now. And then let's go ahead and turn everything back on. All right, now already we have something that's a bit more interesting. Now, I'm not going to go through like all the crazy get it exactly right, but one thing I will tell you is I did turn off the reflections because I thought that it was getting a little bit too much, and basically anything I don't need. So now you'll see before and after, we're just getting a little bit of that variation. Okay, now I obviously spent a little bit more time on this when I was building it for real. You might be able to tell in the black version that it's even more affected. And let's go ahead, if that's not affected for you enough, you can always up the intensity, and then you'll start to get that subtle variation. So that brings us to the last point of this, which is this texture. So normally if I were doing this on the job, I would actually switch between these colors in comp. I wouldn't actually do it in CG, but because I'm not doing this for a client, I can show you what I did. All right, I came in here, and all I'm doing is basically I have a constant color that's going into the color, and I just have a keyframe set. It's pretty simple. I have a keyframe set, kind of messy with the windows here, sorry. But I have a keyframe set, and all it's doing is just switching from red to black. Now, I would highly recommend doing this in comp if you are on an actual job, but I was being lazy. Okay, so that does it. I think we got pretty close to the original. It might not be exactly, but that's the general idea of how we did this setup. Now, for the last part of this video, I'm going to run you through the final shot, which is the 3-up of all the machines. All right, so over here in the final shot, let's go ahead and take a look of how these lights are set up. So what I'm going to do is just run you through every single one so you can kind of see what's happening, and also the order that I went in. So right now we have no lights. I have a key light, and this key light is basically just acting as a top light that is just kind of filling everything overall. This key light has a low spread, a high intensity, and it's not too big. All right, next we have the key red, and what the key red is doing is it's going to create just some interest on this, because I want each machine is special, so let's make it special. So this has a low spread and actually kind of a high intensity, right? And this light is just sitting, once again, pretty close actually. I made this one pretty close. Yeah, so that's what that one's doing. You can see it just kind of by itself. Let's look at our key black. Key black, I have a couple. So this one is just highlighting what's happening just right on this edge. And keep in mind that the scene is animating too. So, if I start to move this around, you're going to see that sometimes I do this stuff so it hits it at certain times, right? So as it moves into place, it's going to hit it more and more and more. So this key black is basically carving out a nice spot here in the front. And once again, it has low spread, same intensity it looks like. Then I added a rim black, which doesn't seem like it's doing much at first, but if you watch right here on these this lower part, and I turn this on, it's giving it a little bit of shape whenever I do that. All right, so we put it all together. Again, if I turn off the rim black, you'll see what it's doing there. Let's go to the key green. Key green is going to be effectively doing kind of the same thing. So it's the same philosophy where we have a light, we have a key light, and then we have a secondary light that's going to give it shape. Low spread, just like the red. That's cool. And I guess we have another key black. I don't fully remember all this, but yeah, the key black, obviously I'm trying to create interest here. That's happening. And it looks like I've been copying my same light almost every single time, because consistency is good, variation's also good, but it's also good to be consistent. So it looks like that's what I was doing. I was copying it every time. And then this key black, it looks like I'm just trying to hit, this might just be more of like a key light in general. This is another kind of like side light that's happening here. Again, these shots are kind of tricky because you have to make everything special, but it's also very reflective and dull at the same time with the plastic. So you have to kind of give it a little bit of everything. So let's see what this light is actually doing. Yeah, it looks like it's just adding a little bit of interest on these sides. That's what it's doing. Let's go to the next one, which is the rim light. Rim light is doing just that. It's creating some top light and also just some light that's happening off screen. This looks like it's a high spread, low intensity. And then if we put these all together, let's just turn off the rim light so you can see. Just adding that, right? Next, what I did is I used a dome light. It's the same dome light that we used before because that kind of makes sense. And this is once again filling everything in as we talked about in the other one. Now, a pretty important thing that I did also is, let me turn all these back on because this is essentially all of our lighting. I have a light blocker here. So you'll see that if I turn this light blocker off, this gets like really bright over here. And I didn't particularly like that. So I just put a light blocker that is blocking that edge. So like less light is hitting it, because I felt like it was just too bright compared to, these other sides. So don't forget to use that kind of stuff. And then the last thing I did is basically I took a bunch of gobos and I just pointed them individually at each object so they each individually have their own one. That's not to say you couldn't do it with one, but personally I was finding it kind of difficult. So I ended up adding individual gobos that some of them just affected the stand, some of them just affected the machine, stuff like that. And then you'll see if we come here, we have alpha, and in the final product, I just added in a gradient, so I had more control in comp. And that is it. That is everything that there is to know about this. For the other shots, all I did was just move lights around, take the same setup, etc., etc. So I know this one was long. If you're still here, congratulations. And thank you so much for tuning in and sticking with us. And we're really happy to be here and do this for you. And I will see you on the next one.